Thank you for joining us for this episode of Behind the Blue. I'm Cody Kaiser with UK Strategic Communications. We are recording this Behind the Blue podcast in mid-April as we prepare for spring commencement and the spring commencement ceremonies. It's a fitting time to talk about the efforts underway at the University of Kentucky to retain and graduate even more students. Here to discuss a key aspect of these efforts, UK's weekly retention meetings, are our guests, Dr. Molly Reynolds, the Associate Vice President for Student Excellence, and Anne-Marie Bickel, Student Analytics Team Lead with the Institutional Research Analytics and Decision Support, or IRADS. Thanks to both of you for being here today. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So I'd like to start off just by having both of you kind of introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about your roles here at UK, kind of the bigger picture of what you do. I'm sure it's a lot more than just what we're talking about today.
Sure. Do you want to go first?
Sure. My name is Anne-Marie Bickel, and I work in Institutional Research Analytics and Decision Support, or IRADS. I work in student analytics, so I work with a team of analysts that support admissions, retention, graduation, and campus housing. And we work to make sure there's consistent and accurate data across the institution, and that we have data that informs and helps drive us toward our institutional goals at UK.
Hi, and I'm Molly Reynolds. I am over student excellence and student success. So my area is the academic focused piece of student success. So in my area, I'm lucky I get to work with Anne-Marie on the weekly retention meeting and efforts, but I oversee teams that do career services at UK. I do all of the academic advising at UK, so I oversee that piece. Our centralized tutoring and learning center and transformative learning is under there. Our TRIO support program is there, our CARES First Generation team. So any piece that's providing that supplemental advising or student support piece is under my area also.
So these are lots of things when people, I think about higher education, they just think about you go to class and you have a place to live and that's kind of it. But there are so many pieces and parts to make the whole thing work. And one of the things that you all look out for are challenges in order to keep students enrolled and keep them moving towards their degree if that's what they want to do. Every good solution starts with a problem or a challenge. So when we talk about these retention meetings, set the stage a little bit for what kind of predicated this.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's such a piece of our everyday fabric right now that I kind of forget until we have moments like this to talk about it, that it's a big deal, and not all institutions do this and have this organized weekly approach to supporting students and putting them first. But this came about under President Capelluto's leadership in 2015 to really think about how do we put students first? How do we make them the center of all we do? And we were doing that, but in different pockets. And so this is an organized approach that really looks at these pillars, that we are making data-driven decisions and supporting students around the academic piece, of course, but also that students we're whole people, they're holistic. We have to support them this way. So we have efforts around wellness and engagement there, our belonging pieces, and that financial stability. So that is a piece of what led the meeting, but how do we do it in a data-driven way to make sure that we're having that culture of evidence, our culture of care, that students are more than numbers, that every gain we make is a student we're supporting and getting them over the finish line. So those are some pieces there, and I'll let you jump in there too.
And so just to put some numbers to it, for a long time at the institution, our retention rate had been in the upper 70s, low 80s, and we had sort of been stagnant around that point. And so Dr. Capelluto really charged the institution to reach a 90% retention rate. For us, that was an increase that we were willing to undertake and are continuing to undertake. And in addition to that, we were also charged and challenged with meeting a 70% 6-year graduation. And so for us, that really meant that we had to take those disparate efforts of supporting students across the institution and bring everyone together into a space where we could really talk about how we were going to achieve those goals. And ultimately, the weekly retention meeting space has become really that primary space where we have people from all across campus, faculty, staff, who come to talk about supporting our students and to ultimately reach those goals. And like Molly said, those goals represent the individual lives of our students, And that's why it's so important to us. We want to see more students graduate from the University of Kentucky.
I've been at the university since 2011. I'm before Dr. Capilouto by about 6 months, so I've been here basically the entirety of his time at UK. And I know that during that time, bringing the enrollment numbers up have really been a focus of bringing those freshman class sizes up, but also having that retention there as well. Let's talk a little bit about that kind of student-centric. You want to make those students, you can bring those numbers up, but if those students don't feel like they are a part of this university, like that they're wanted here and that they really feel like this is the place for them to be. So putting them at the center of this, let's talk about that framework and those primary drivers of student success in order to kind of put those students at the center.
Sure. So, I mean, there's 4 pieces that I showed, pillars that are under student success under our VP, Kirsten Turner, and it was important for her to place students in the middle as we're thinking of that, all of our decisions. But we don't go into any decision or any retention space or any meeting anymore without thinking of those 4 areas. Our students are here. What are those academic needs? What are some successes that we can capitalize on? But what are some areas that they need in the wellness space? We have now integrated success coaching that looks at students' needs, how we can help with executive functioning skills, how we can help them transition in and then transition out for lives of meaning and purpose. Normalizing help-seeking behaviors, thinking through how we can think of major to graduation and that financial piece of stability. I mean, we were doing all of these efforts, we just weren't doing them collectively and having that through line. And IRADS and Anne-Marie and the team and looking at that data to doing piece. What is the data screaming and making interventions align with that is huge. And we're seeing those gains, which Anne-Marie will share from what we were hoping to accomplish and where we are now. It's amazing in that structure.
Nothing to add.
Okay, good. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier, you talked about how we kind of stand out as far as schools that kind of do this and look at this. We're kind of trying to be on the forefront of this. That type of institutional infrastructure, like how does that all come together to really support these drivers? And you talked about Dr. Turner and her involvement. Like all these pieces, it's not just one college or unit or department, it's a lot of factors coming together. So tell me a little bit about that infrastructure.
Sure.
Yeah, so it comes from top-down leadership. And when we say that our institution is really unique in our approach to retention, it really is unique in our approach to retention. And I'm very proud of the work that we do in this space. A couple of things have really helped to drive our retention efforts. That culture of care that Molly was just talking about. So seeing a student as an individual is a really important piece of the work we do. We talk a lot about the numbers, but we really do care about the individual student. And then the culture of communication, specifically strategic communication. We have a very strong partnership with our friends over in marketing and brand strategy and PR, and work very closely with them in order to really form communications that meet our students where they are throughout their journey at the university. So it's very important. I know that I meet with marketing and brand strategy multiple times a week to talk through how we want to communicate with our students and what's most important for them to know about at a specific point in time. And then lastly, really that culture of evidence, and that's where I think IRADS has been a really great partner, if I can brag on us, in creating that culture of evidence in these weekly retention meetings, and I'm sure we'll talk about this here in a moment. We really spend a large chunk of time going over the real-time data of our students and if they're being retained and which students do we have an opportunity to really achieve better outcomes with. So it's really for us about the data, about making data-informed decisions and not just making decisions because they feel right, but really because the decision is ultimately supported by the data as well.
Yeah, and I think one word that Anne-Marie just used that's unique at this institution is opportunity. We don't treat students at risk, and you'll hear that word used or marginalized or, some of a deficit mindset for students. We don't believe that at all. So it's opportunity to engage more across these pillars, how we can support them. And when this meeting started, this retention meeting, it's like 10 people in a conference room in Miller Hall. But what even was unique then is that there was a blue chair to always recognize that that's the student. Any decision we make has to be driven by what the student needs. And so now we have 300 people across campus on an invite with about 85 regularly attending every week. And it's not just that meeting, it's everything that leads into it and all the communication afterwards. And so, there's a lot of behind the scenes work, but people know Fridays at UK, you're going to be at retention from 10 to 11:30 if you are wanting to engage and bring up questions, and then the following week your questions get answered. And I think that feedback loop is very unique also. We have had a lot of visitors from other institutions come in, and they're like, okay, so this is real. They're like, I can't believe, one, that you have such a standard agenda that everyone expects to know that you're going to get the data. We go data to doing for intervention, communication and calendar. We do it the same each week so people know what to have, what to expect. But then people are all invited to engage, ask questions. It's fluid. It is not only leadership can make decisions. Everyone is at the table. Like, this is wild to see this. So that's exciting to get to share that with partners as well and other institutions.
It's interesting too, looking at that kind of tri-culture approach. You can have all the data, all the analytics, all of that information, statistical information, but I feel like those three areas really probably help you stay focused and centered on, at the heart of that, it's the student. It's the student experience. It's what the student gains out of their time here at the university.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we have speakers that, we'll have 1 to 2 each week to share some, it's important for us to have those interventions, people who are raising their hand, say, I have an idea, to come back and share what's working. And we always have them bring student quotes, some real student experience that came out of those interventions. And it's impactful to say, wow, the student's writing their comeback story. They didn't know anyone cared until we did this thing and we reached out and made that call, or we sent that postcard or letter. That's pretty big. It's pretty rewarding to get to sit there and hear that each week.
One of the other things that's come out of that meeting that we've been doing for many years at this point, which is very exciting to say, is we communicate with students via text message individually and directly, and someone at UK responds back to them. And that's something that I don't know that a lot of institutions do. That's something that I think is really unique about UK, and is a really amazing way, I think, that we make a big institution feel smaller, because we have someone who is dedicated to responding to students when they have questions, concerns, and we're proactively reaching out to them to ask what questions, what concerns do they have, and there's someone there to respond and answer. And that's just one of the ways that we support students, but that has come out of that retention meeting spaces. There was a need to reach out to students, communicate with them at different points in time in the semester. And shout out to Ashley Beck. She's one of the women that we work with, who's amazing and really helps to navigate students through the institution, mostly via text message. Yes. She does a lot of things, but via text message, and supports those students that way.
People trying to question her, thinking she's a bot. She's like, I'm a real person. I'm responding to you right now.
I want to be mindful of the time that we have. I do want to kind of pull back and take kind of an overview of this. Tell me about the results that we've seen from this from an institutional perspective, as far as like you've seen the meter move as far as the numbers go. Where are we with that?
Yep. So second fall retention is at 87%, which for us is huge. We are continuing, of course, to strive toward that 90% retention goal, but 87% felt like a huge landmark for us. In addition, we've seen our 6-year graduation rate already surpass that 70% mark that we talked about earlier. So our fall 2018 cohort, they had a 6-year graduation rate of 71.2%. So that's very exciting for us, because that ultimately means that there are more students who are graduating from the University of Kentucky and earning that degree, and ultimately going on to live lives of meaning and purpose. So
those students at risk at other institutions are doing really well here. And I think that's important too in Capilouto's leadership. Kentucky's never cut the tail off of who we've accepted at this institution. We're representing the whole Commonwealth and making sure we're serving the whole Commonwealth, and these numbers show that.
Let me ask this, through this whole process, from the work you and the teams have put into this, the conversations that you've had with colleagues across campus who may or may not be a part of these meetings, what are the important takeaways that you have about this initiative?
Sure, so I would say a few things. We, even if you're not at the meeting, you're hearing about the meeting. We have a Canvas shell. We put everything in there. We're communicating this out. I think what's unique about people that are situated on the team is that we're in other spaces to also share this information. So I co-lead the Associate Dean's meeting, and our advising leads, Todd is everywhere. Todd Brand, you're in so many spaces too. So it's a through line still, even if you can't necessarily come to that meeting, we are still being very active and communicating the goals, the needs, and the objectives there. I don't know if that answered that question there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that something that carries over? Is that something that carries over to, say, for example, faculty recruitment, faculty retention, and even support staff, like through student success, who maybe come here and find out about this, and they're like, "This is fantastic at the school I was at before. We didn't do this. I've had so many students who I've had in classes who have really been concerned about." Like, have you heard any of those types of stories and situations?
We had someone present today actually who shared just that. They, one of our new AVPs that has been here 100 days now, he said, he got to present today, and he said, I just, I'm so blown away that of this coordinated effort and the voices in the room. He's like, I didn't have that at all at my institution. He's like, I'm so glad to be a part of this. No one's doing it better. And we're hearing that in other spaces. I think for faculty, they're all in, of course, on, supporting students, but at times you see more of the inside the class impact and all they're doing, but they're not aware necessarily, or haven't been aware in the past, that when they issue an academic alert and they're raising their hand, which they're doing, the back end, how those alerts are being answered and that feedback loop. And so in my role, I'm doing a better job of sharing that you're raising your hand, you're doing the things. Here's the other side of the non-classroom impact, the out-of-classroom impact of where that's going and that whole process. So I think everyone's in it, but we've had a concerted effort now to have that feedback loop of every end of the process of supporting students. And I think for staff too, getting to see what's happening in the classroom as well, of what are faculty seeing, what are they experiencing, why aren't students coming to class, what kind of work are they not doing, or the homework assignment. So it's good to see both sides of the table.
Yeah, I can see where if you're support staff in some way, if you feel like you're not, like you're almost asking like, what good am I doing if I'm not seeing institutional support for helping these students? I'm trying to work with students to help them.
Yeah.
And I can see where that probably, it really makes an impact for those people to make them feel like my work is fulfilling. I'm doing something important here.
Yeah. And I think what's unique at the retention space is that UK 101 is our first year experience course that's ran out of student success. And so even though we're the non-academic side, because we're out of class, so many of those individuals that are leading interventions are also teaching UK 101. And so we're sharing that piece also collectively. So that staff faculty divide just doesn't really exist anymore, which is pretty exciting.
You were asking about essentially, well, this is how I interpreted it, kind of the secret sauce,
Yes.
like what makes this work. And I think two things have been very important to make our weekly retention meeting space work. One, the democratization of data. So I think that when you look in higher education in general, specifically in sort of the work we do, there's a lot of, there can be a bit of a silo between the people and the data. A lot of times the data feels very separate, and there's not a lot of transparency when it comes to the data that ultimately affects the outcomes. And I think at UK what we've done really well is we've tried to be as transparent as possible. And that's why that real-time data is so important to everything we're doing in the weekly retention space, because we want people to know what our retention numbers are. We want people to know what the data represents. And so that's been a really key piece of what we've done. In addition to that, my personal belief is that the very key secret sauce is individual relationships. We really get to a point where we essentially take a layered approach. We're looking at the data, we're talking about the strategic communication, we have institutional efforts to support students, and we get to a point every year where we think, what else should we do? What else do we need to do? And really what it comes down to is we need to have individual relationships with our students. So a really important piece of that is it really does take us reaching out to individual students in order to move the needle. That's really what we see time and time again each year when we're working in the retention space is it takes one individual person reaching out to a student to ultimately affect our outcomes.
I mentioned at the first of this conversation that we are in the middle of April. We are rapidly approaching our May commencement ceremonies. As we roll into commencement season and you hear about the numbers of students who graduate and attend commencement and walk across that stage, how does it make you feel knowing that your team has played a really big role in helping students stay and graduate from the University of Kentucky?
It's really hard to sort of sum it up. I guess I can start with saying that it feels very personal for a lot of reasons. First, I'm a 2-time UK grad, most recently graduated from grad school a couple years ago, so just went through my own commencement and felt very surreal. And then I have 2 brothers, one that has graduated from UK College of Engineering and then College of Medicine, the other who's graduated from the College of Design. And so for us, it feels very personal. It's not just, our sister works at UK, we are a UK family. And so for me, when I think about commencement for the students that we're supporting, I think about a little bit about my own journey and how much I've learned since then. Really, my start in data analytics was through Dance Blue at UK, being on committee. That was the first time I ever did data analytics and thought it was the coolest thing. So really my experience as a student kicked off my interest in data analytics. So for our students, I get very excited thinking about them having had this amazing experience at the University of Kentucky, going on to graduate and going even beyond that to affect the Commonwealth of Kentucky and beyond. And it's just surreal too. I know that every year there are at least a handful of students that, even though I might be more of the numbers person and not meeting with students individually, there are still a handful of students that I know that we have talked about in the retention space and we have personally helped in some way, shape, or form toward them graduating.
We'll know the names. When you hear them, we're like, that's someone we called 28 times that one summer.
Yeah.
I mean, it's truly
true.
like that. And I think about, gosh, for so many of these students or first-gen students, they have to be the first so their family members can be the next. Like, think of such a big deal that this is for their communities. I've graduated here. I care so much also. My oldest will be a student here next year. And so I think, I'm so invested. I wouldn't send my kid here if I didn't believe in the mission of this institution, and we are helping so many families take their next step, so it means a lot.
It is such an interesting kind of convergence of looking at these big numbers, trying to look at all of these data sets and trying to figure all of this out, but also realizing that you're working on an individual level at the same time. It's such an interesting kind of combination of the two. And it really does speak to that idea of when you hear these names, like this is not just benefiting the university and students at the time they are here at the university, but also when they go out into the world. So many of these stories of students who graduate and then go on to have careers and make an impact in Lexington, in Kentucky, in the country, in the world, who could say, I might not have been here had it not been for this very thing, the people who were working with this to help me through this process and encourage me and get me to a point where I was able to walk across the stage, get that degree, and now I've gone on and look what I've become. You know, these are going to pay huge dividends way down the line.
Right. And we're always very excited too, because, you know, we're excited about the work that we do. And then I'm reminded just how amazing our students are. You know, they're ultimately the people who have to go to class and take the tests and take the quizzes and do the homework and be engaged with their friends and do all of the things that, you know, we know it's important to do to be an engaged and successful college student. And they're the ones doing all of that work. We're just there to support them. And I think it's just, I'm time and time again reminded of how amazing they really are, that they just continue with grit and pursue what's ahead of them.
What's next as we move ahead? We've finished up this academic year, we're moving forward. Give me an idea of kind of where this meeting, where this retention program is heading.
We don't stop. Yep. And so we actually met after retention today to talk about our anti-melt efforts for summer. Students leave and they go home, and sometimes they don't want to come back, or, you know, when they see their friends from high school and, you know, nothing's better than a home cooked meal, you know, and all the things sometimes. We want them back. Our institution's good because they're here, and so we won't stop. We have plans from the day they leave. We will be working all summer to make sure students come back. What are our next intervention pieces? 87 was good. Our goal is 88 now. We want to get to 90, so we won't be stopping. So we have a very strategic summer plan. This is not the summer of vacation for us. We will be thinking about reaching out to students, let them know that our UK is good, or is wonderful because they are the U in UK, right? That we want them back. So we will be amping up all of our summer efforts.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I think, you know, practically speaking, the 90% retention rate is certainly something we ultimately want to achieve because it represents our individual students. And then I think, you know, we've got a lot of plans for this summer for our first year students who are about to become second year students. And we also have some really amazing plans in store for our incoming students. So we're really excited to be welcoming the new class of students here in August. Feels kind of surreal that is going to happen, but also just really excited to be able to share about this work because my first job at UK was in undergraduate recruitment. And so I really think about these weekly retention meetings and how comforting I think it would be, as I would assume, as a parent who's sending your child off to college. Molly, you would know, that there are individuals who really care about their student and want to see their student succeed. And so we'll have a whole new crop of students that will get to be excited about seeing succeed here in the next couple of months.
But not expecting perfection.
Yep.
We know that resilience, we want students to, you know, learn the paths. They don't have to come in and have it all figured out. In fact, we want to help them along the way. And so we know that we're going to have enough things in place to help students as they figure things out.
Excellent. Molly Reynolds, Anne-Marie Bickel, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about this. This is such a huge, huge initiative and investment in our students. And it just sounds like you really have done so much, and we're seeing so many positive results from this. Thanks so much for the efforts in this and helping put our students first here at the University of Kentucky.
Thanks for
the
having
time.
me.